Hello there, welcome along to VLGA Connect for another week, brought to you by Hunt and Hunt Lawyers. This is our weekly look at what's happening around the Victorian local government sector. We're joined by special guests and we catch you up on some of the latest news. What have we got in store for you today? Well, the IBAC CEO Alison Byrne is here to discuss the latest Perceptions of Corruption report and its findings. A move to limit notices of motion at the City of Whittlesea is on Tony Raunic's mind. We talk about the implications of that, along with the newly released Municipal Monitors report. And we continue our Meet the VLGA Board series, catching up with Vice President Janet Pearce a little later on in today's episode. But first off, it's time to catch up on some Connect News headlines. The newly appointed CEO of Macedon Shire Council has been forced to take unplanned leave after a breast cancer diagnosis. Tilla Buden was due to start this week and will be on leave for the foreseeable future. Former Bayside CEO Mick Cummins has stepped in as acting CEO until mid-December. Michael Tudball has been appointed as the acting CEO of the Borough of Queenscliff for a minimum period of 3 months. That appointment will take effect on the 1st of December after the departure of Martin Gill, who recently came to terms with the council, ending his employment contract early. Greater Bendigo Councillor John McElrath has resigned his position effective immediately, citing work-related time commitments as the reason. A by-election will be required to fill the extraordinary vacancy, with the details to be announced. Greater Bendigo City Council has declared 7 properties surplus to requirements and will proceed with their sale, depositing proceeds into public space or land and building reserves to fund future community infrastructure. Mornington Peninsula Shire Council has voted to introduce interim planning rules for land at high risk of landslides, following recommendations from the Macrae landslide inquiry. The new erosion management overlay will affect approximately 33,000 properties across 7% of the Shire, requiring most property owners to obtain planning permits before development or vegetation removal. Maribyrnong Council has welcomed the state government's decision to introduce truck restrictions on Williamstown Road once the Westgate Tunnel opens next month. The no truck zone will be enforced on weeknights from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. and over weekends from 8 p.m. Friday to 6 a.m. Monday. And an Elstonwick apartment block has made history as Victoria's first to install a shared solar battery system. 26 apartments have pooled resources to install rooftop solar and a 50 kilowatt-hour battery through Glen Ira's Solar Savers program. The program sets a new benchmark for renewable energy in multi-dwelling buildings across the state. For more news from the world of local government across Australia and beyond, including all of the mayoral election results from this week in Victoria, listen to the Local Government News Roundup podcast, available wherever you listen to podcasts and brought to you by the VLGA. Next up on VLGA Connect, we're very pleased to have with us the Chief Executive Officer of the Independent Broad-Based Commission Against Corruption. It's the last time I'm going to say that. We're going to say IBAC from this point on. Alison Byrne, hello and welcome.
Great. Hello. Thanks, Chris, for having me.
It's a mouthful, isn't it? Do you ever use the full title yourself?
Look, I start by saying it, and it's the Independent Broad-Based Anti-Corruption Commission, and then IBAC. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I got it wrong, didn't I? So
a little bit, but coming from New South Wales, I also have to watch out that I say IBAC, not ICAC. So.
Yes, true. Yes, true. And your background, I think you were at the County Court of Victoria before you came to IBAC, is that right?
That's correct. So yes, at the County Court as CEO before joining IBAC, and my career has been in regulation and criminal law as a solicitor and prosecutor. So always really loved this space. So yeah, very happy to be here.
What was it about the role at IBAC that attracted you when you put your hand up for it?
Well, and hopefully I don't sound insincere, but it brings all the things that I love together. I love regulation. I've come from, my very first role was at the New South Wales Crime Commission, so that covert investigation. But by and large, I'm a really proud public servant, and I think most people are. So, you know, upholding the integrity of the public service and ensuring that the vast majority of people who do the right thing are recognised is really important. So love that part of the job.
Doesn't sound at all insincere, Alison, and we're very happy to have you here. So, reason for the chat today really is the recent survey results that you've brought out on perceptions of corruption, and this looked at perceptions of state MPs as well as councillors across Victoria, and it found that the majority think corruption's a problem, didn't it?
It did, and that was at local government and state level. The majority do think that there is vulnerability to corruption, and that's not a problem. In fact, I agree. Anywhere where there's power, where there's decision making of influence and importance, there are corruption risks. There are other risks. Recognising the risks is really important and is in fact key to preventing them. So that recognition of the vulnerability in local government is actually a really important thing.
I guess it's important to differentiate. Saying that systems are vulnerable to corruption is different to saying we have corruption or rampant corruption, isn't it?
That's right.
Yeah. What do you put down the difference in the perception between MPs and councillors to? Because more MPs thought it was an issue than councillors, didn't they?
They did. And I mean, obviously, they're different political environments, and there's something to be said there. But also, the survey was conducted about 6 months after the recent local government election, and almost 50% of respondents for local government were in their first term. So perhaps that had something to do with perception and experience being the majority within their first 6 months of serving.
Yeah, and focusing on councillors as we will for most of this conversation, they did also say there's a strong ethical culture in their workplace that they've observed. Do you see a contradiction there against that perception of the risk of corruption response?
No, I don't. And again, it comes back to me, the fact that risk in and of itself isn't a problem. There's risks in a lot of environments where there's the ability to influence, where there's complexity and where there's really important things to be done. So the recognition of the risk and the perception that there still is an ethical culture, or what we call a pro-integrity culture, to tackle that risk is not contradictory. In fact, it's what we need.
So in terms of the types of corruption that councillors think there is a risk of, favouritism and nepotism seem to be at the top of the list. Can we talk a bit about the difference between those and why you think they're the highest concerns?
Yeah, and that's really interesting because the perception survey did show that local government respondents thought that favouritism and nepotism, about 85%, said it was the most important or the most prevalent risk. But in fact, when we look at our data for allegations, it's not. So our data in the corruption and misconduct allegation dashboard that's available to anybody to have a look at on the IBAC website, the data for the 5-year period 2018 to 2023 shows that the most prevalent allegation in the local government space is inaction. So indeed, that's consistent with the state government responses to the Perception of Corruption survey. Saying that, the second most prevalent allegation is favouritism. So I think it's important, and indeed IBAC drives our prevention and education functions around not only perception, but where we see the allegations and where we investigate as well. So we are focusing on favouritism, nepotism, but also those areas of inaction as well.
So inaction was much higher, as you say, for MPs than it was for councillors. Is there some different structural issues or systemic issues that give rise to those different perceptions that you're aware of?
I'm not aware of different structural issues. Again, there is obviously that difference in terms of term of service at the time of the Perception of Corruption surveys. But our allegations that we've received, even in the last financial year, 10% of the complaints and notifications that we receive are from local government. And in that 10%, roughly, about 30% related to that favouritism and nepotism that resulted in investigation or referral.
Let's talk a bit more about inaction. This is the failure to report wrongdoing. This is, in effect, turning a blind eye when you suspect something might be happening that's improper?
Yes. Well, there's multiple forms of inaction.
Right.
There's that form, the failure to report or turn a blind eye, as you've said. But actually the more prevalent form that we see in the allegations in the local government space is inaction in terms of assessment of licences, of grants or complaints at the local government level. So we get people who complain to say, I've lodged this licence, heard nothing about it, or nothing's been done about my complaint. So inaction in terms of inability to take action for the community.
What do you think are the barriers that would prevent councillors in particular from taking action in those examples?
Well, and I guess too, the other thing to point out is it's not just councillors, it's officers within the council as well. And our data covers both areas, particularly from that prevention and risk perspective. So in terms of inaction, in some of those areas that I've mentioned, it's more the council officers space than councillors. But in terms of barriers for both, ensuring that you have the right policies, the right systems and structures set up so that people understand what's appropriate. They understand what they should do and why they should do it. And making that transparent so that the community and the people who make complaints or who lodge applications actually understand how it will be assessed and they have their expectations managed. That's really important. But of course, you've got to make sure that you have processes set up to monitor and then audit that people are following those policies and procedures as well. It's one thing to have them. It's another thing to make sure they're being followed. And finally, I think just to round it out, councillors have a really important role in establishing a speak up culture. So creating a safe space where people can raise issues, raise concerns, and feel that they can do that within their environment. And of course, IBAC has protections for people who make complaints directly to us, and there's the opportunity to make anonymous complaints to IBAC as well.
Yeah, you make a good point about it's not enough just to have the policy, you've got to then back it up. And I guess raise awareness and have discussions, conversations about those policies and about those processes so that it's an ongoing discussion, not just a set and forget type of arrangement.
Exactly. And I think too, sometimes when there's issues, you see the reports from IBAC, particularly in the local government area, actually having a discussion about it and in the workplace, in the local government council, and saying, this is what went wrong here. Sitting with that discomfort and actually working out how to make sure it doesn't happen in your space as well. Learn from other people's mistakes.
Alison, the survey shows that councillors and MPs have more confidence in IBAC's investigative and awareness-raising functions than its detection and prevention capabilities. How do you respond to that? How do you work to strengthen those detection capabilities, or at least the confidence in them that people have?
It's a really difficult one, right? Because in terms of prevention, how do we show the success of our prevention measures? Some people might say, well, it's about how many complaints you receive, but I'd really say that's not the case at all. We could have an increase in complaints because of a very successful awareness campaign and really raise people's understanding and perception of IBAC, confidence in IBAC, so they make more complaints. Similarly, there could be a decrease in trust and confidence, and so there's less complaints. We survey people from our engagement activities and our prevention activities to see, will they apply their learnings? Do they feel more confident in raising concerns and allegations and so forth? And we receive a very high rating in that regard to show some success around prevention. So there's that element in terms of our prevention function. So in terms of detection, there are other aspects that really influence what people see and what they can see. Obviously, a large percentage of our investigations are covert or have covert activities. People won't see what we do in that regard. But more importantly, IBAC's legislation has very strict controls about what we can report, what we can publish, and how we do so. So in the recent IOC, the Integrity Oversight Committee of Parliament's hearing into IBAC legislation, our submission went into changes to the legislation to enable IBAC to report on outcomes, to report on recommendations, and to make specific findings available to the public. So that will increase transparency and that will increase people's understanding and awareness of our detection, of our investigations, and importantly, of our findings. And I think that will go a long way to ensuring that people understand that IBAC is working. There is things going on in the background.
Yeah. Do you think that your assessment of the level of corruption and the type of corruption activities that you're looking into in local government align with what people are telling you in the survey? Does it line up?
It does, by and large, it does when we talk about favouritism being the highest indicator or risk in the perception survey and being the second highest in terms of the allegations. Inaction, as I've said. Procurement is an enduring risk and issue that we see. So they do align, but there are aspects of each of those areas where we see emerging risks. And that's where it's really important for IBAC to work with councils and to work with councillors and officers to understand where risks are emerging and trends. So, for instance, in conflicts of interests, in misuse of position or in misuse of information, that's an area that is increasing in local government. People are ripe for interference from private entities, organised crime syndicates, and even foreign entities in terms of the information that they hold. So this is an area that IBAC will be focusing on throughout our next 3-year period, not just in local government, but indeed in local government and state as well.
Yeah, I guess when I first became involved in local government, the idea that organised crime or foreign entities might be playing a factor somewhere was almost unthinkable. How real is that threat?
So it is a real threat
Yeah.
because of the vast amount of valuable information being held by our local governments, and also because of the career trajectory of local government councillors. You know, they might start in local council, but we see many people then go into state, territorial, and federal politics as well.
Yeah. All right. So 68% of councillors believe corruption's a problem in Victoria. What's your message to them in terms of how they should respond in the realities of their day-to-day work?
So please, contact IBAC if you have concerns. As I've said, we have protections, the whistleblower protections or public interest disclosure protections for people who make certain complaints. You can also make complaints anonymously. You can call IBAC at any time to have discussions about things where you're not quite sure. So that's one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is, of course, around education and engagement. In the past year, October 2024 to October 2025, IBAC undertook 17 engagements with local government, the induction programs after the local government election, peak body invitations like VLGA, and indeed stakeholder forums at local government. Please invite us along. We're really keen to be able to speak to you either en masse or your individual councils about what we're seeing and how we can help you. Jump on the website. We've got heaps of artifacts, e-learning modules and so forth that you can take. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. And then, of course, making sure you have the right frameworks in place in your own organisations. But saying all that, the fact that we've been invited to so many forums and stakeholder engagement and induction programs shows that there's not just a perception of corruption as we see in the survey, but there's a commitment to building a pro-integrity culture in local government, and that's really commendable.
Yeah, commitment to understanding obligations. We need to give a plug to the Northern Councils Alliance. It was my pleasure to facilitate a panel discussion there a few weeks ago with one of your Deputy Commissioners, Colleen Bell, who was terrific as part of those conversations. So more of that is happening as it seems across the sector. Alison, before I let you go, I know this is not the first time the survey's been done. When do you think it'll be run again? How often do you intend to survey these perceptions?
Yes, so the last survey was 2023 of local government councillors and members of parliament. Last year, we conducted surveys of police officers, the community members and businesses and so forth. So it's alternative years. But of course, we do take into account the political cycles to try to ensure we get the best bang for our buck as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you for explaining that to us. If anyone wants to check out the survey and the findings, it's all there on the IBAC website, and it makes for very interesting reading indeed. Alison Byrne, CEO of IBAC, thank you very much for coming on VLGA Connect.
Thank you, Chris. Pleasure to be here.
Next up on VLGA Connect, it's great to welcome back Tony Raunic from Hunt and Hunt Lawyers with a little bit to catch up on. Tony, how have you been?
It's become that busy time of year, hasn't it, Chris and viewers? It's the time where we're looking forward to the Christmas break, but we're thinking, oh, I've got to do a lot of things before then. And
Yes,
I think that's
yeah.
a lot of the organisations across the sector are thinking that too.
And
And
you're running out of time very quickly. We've got, including this episode, I think 5 VLGA Connects left before the end of
wow,
the year. Yeah. So we'd
how
hope
many
we hope
nights
to
to
see
Santa?
you at least on 2 or 3 of those, Tony, all being well. Couple of things to catch up on here. A monitor report that has
Mm.
just recently come out, which we'll talk about in a moment. An interesting development as part of mayoral elections, which are happening all across the state. But first, let's go out to Whittlesea, a place near and dear to my heart. In fact, I had a good chat to Martin Taylor, the outgoing mayor, just in the last week or so for the roundup. Some interesting developments there with their governance rules, Tony.
Yes, yes. Of course, they had the Commission of Inquiry report, um, but also and I think partly in reaction to that, there's been a move to update the governance rules, but it also I think reflects a consistency of municipal monitor recommendations across
Mm.
numerous organisations, in the sector. Brimbank, Moonee Valley, Greater Geelong, and Glenelg come to mind. So the council voted on the 19th, oh sorry, the 18th of November this week to put out for public feedback, public consultation, if you like, proposed revised governance rules. And that created a little bit of controversy. And it's probably interesting to jump into, what were the revisions, Chris?
This is largely around notices of motion.
It is, Chris, and,
Yeah.
and you're probably not surprised by that. And
No.
as I say, they've featured highly in recent monitor reports. In this case, the proposed new governance rules certainly tighten up the provisions and make it more difficult for a notice of motion to be tabled and be able to be debated at council. One of the proposed changes is that a notice of motion to be considered by council will require 1/3 of the total number of councillors to sign the notice. So we have 11 councillors at Whittlesea. So 1/3, when you average it out, translates to round it up, translates to four councillors. So we require that considerable number of councillors, if you like, to show their support, at least for a discussion, before the notice of motion can hit the agenda paper of council. Um, there is also a proposal that a notice of motion can only call for an officer report to be presented at a future council meeting. And we've seen across the sector, Chris, some sort of varieties of this provision that certainly restrict notice of motion from, um, having significant budgetary implications or significant resource implications and
Yeah,
meaning that
or
the report.
setting council policy by notice of motion, or undoing a previous decision of the council by notice of motion. Those are problematic areas that require more considered advice, don't they? That's the general governance principle.
Absolutely. And frankly, I like this idea too of requiring the officer report, because it means that when the councillors ultimately make a final decision, if you like, on the matter that was the subject of the notice of motion, they've at least got the benefit of considered expert officer advice that they
Mm.
may agree with or not.
And
Um,
and the benefit of time for all councillors to fully consider the issues that are behind that particular issue.
Didn't you hate that when you were an officer, and certainly I as a councillor, that if you walked into the council offices and here's someone's proposed notice of motion being circulated a day or two before, you're still trying to get your head around the implications and the language, and council officers
Mm.
running from place to place trying to provide information. I agree with you, Chris. And another element of these proposed changes is that an individual councillor will be restricted to only being a signatory for up to 2 submitted notices of motion per meeting. So
Right.
that's really designed to kind of limit the number of notices that come to any particular council meeting agenda. And we have seen meetings where they're dominated by a series of notices of motion and the councillors virtually don't debate, planning matters, policy matters, other
Yeah.
officer reports and recommendations, haven't we?
Well, we certainly have, and I've always felt that the overuse of notices of motion is a bit of a red flag for the cohesiveness and the good functioning of a particular council. I think monitors have noted that as well, haven't they?
They certainly have, but this motion wasn't passed unanimously by any
Right.
means. There was an attempt at an amendment by Councillor Aidan McClendon, who of course has only recently returned to council after a 6-month suspension. He had felt that the overall motion needed to remove reference to these changes to governance rules regarding notices of motion. He felt that it was a suffocation of democracy, and that also councils shouldn't preempt the apparently coming model governance rules that are perhaps under consideration and may be legislated in 2026.
What's happening? What's happening with those? Because I feel like we've been hearing that they're coming for ages.
And I trip up at the name because are they model or are they mandatory? That's still a question.
Yeah.
And look, it does seem that they're definitely still been under some consideration, but I think the timelines for them being introduced for public consultation into legislation, they're quite many months away at the very least.
So unlikely, starting to look unlikely they would be in before next year, before the end of the year. Yeah.
When we look at the November 26th state election looming, that is an issue, Chris. So I think that whilst I suspect that some councils across the sector have thought, well, we won't, we've got some failings in our governance rules or some improvements we could make, but let's wait and see what comes out in 2026. There's a risk there that we won't see anything in 2026. And that the council will have to deal with a not fit for purpose set of governance rules. So I mentioned Councillor McClendon. Councillor Michael Labrador also spoke against these changes to the provisions around notices of motion. He felt it would hamstring councillors' ability to raise an issue. However, the majority of councillors supported the proposed changes, and they'll now go out to a public consultation process. And I think overall, as you say, this attempt to limit notices of motion to only where there is some clear, significant support among the councillors. So 1/3 of councillors seems to me to be okay. Any more than that, I'd probably have a problem, because it's like having a vote before you have a vote, if you like. But the notion that I, as a solitary councillor who can just win over another councillor to sign something, can sort of dominate the agenda by multiple notices of motion each month, I think has been problematic for some councils, and indeed has led to dysfunction.
All right, interesting observations there, notices of motion. We'll see what sort of public feedback Whittlesea gets for that, and whether other councils might look to follow suit in due course. Tony, a couple of other things just to touch on quickly before we run out of time. There was a municipal monitors report released just in the last couple of weeks from Horsham. Stephen Kingshott was the monitor there. Any particular learnings from this one we should be aware of?
Yeah, look, I think we shouldn't be surprised that there was a monitor appointed. Firstly, there had been a monitor previously, Jude Holt was a monitor some years ago.
This was the
This
council that failed to get their budget through, wasn't it? There was quite a bit of attention on that. Yeah,
That's right. So that
Mm.
seemed to be what crystallised the appointment by the minister, the lateness of getting the budget through, which related to a problem with a new IT program. And Chris, I know
Right.
you've had those
Yeah.
sort of roles at organisations, introducing new IT programs fraught with difficulty.
Nightmares. Yeah.
But in this case, I think there's a context where, Horsham has had a very high turnover of councillors over the years. I think in 2024, 5 of the 6 councillors were, sorry, it's 5 of the 6,
Six
6
of
of the
7.
7. That sounds better.
Yeah.
6 of the 7 are first timers, and indeed the term before in 2020, the same scenario, 6 of the 7, and in fact. I saw a stat there in the Monitor report that over 4 election cycles, only 5 councillors were returning councillors.
Wow.
So that would create, that real dearth of experience, understanding of meeting procedure, the processes at council, the timelines for getting council plans and budgets and these sorts of things through. So,
And I assume, without going too far down the rabbit hole, Tony, that was a combination of councillors not restanding, but also councillors not being re-elected because of some of these issues that have been playing out quite publicly.
Yeah, definitely. And really intense media scrutiny in Horsham from, the print media and social media on the council at the time. But look, the good news, I think, is that since the November elections, the Monitor's comments are that the councillors are, dealing with difficult decisions in a diligent way. They're managing their conflicts of interests and confidential information appropriately. They've, had some challenges. Of course, they went through a long process to appoint a new CEO, but Gail Gatt is in there. There's a good relationship apparently between the councillors and the CEO, and the Monitor seem quite positive about the future for rural city of Horsham.
Okay, so check that out. It's on the Local Government Victoria website. I think there's a link there, Tony. Did you see it between the Horsham Monitor report and we were just talking about the City of Whittlesea, who has a monitor at the moment?
Go on, tell
Well,
me.
I think it's Stephen Kingshot in both cases.
Oh,
It's
there you
gone
go.
from one to the other. So there you go. Yarra this week. Stephen Jolly returned as mayor. A lot of returning mayors I've noticed in the results that we've had, but this one has got a little bit more attention because there's been some publicity around a romance on the council. And I noticed in some of the reporting a question about whether any conflicts of interest might apply. But of course, this is not the first council that has had partners serving at the same time around the council table.
Oh, that's correct. We've had married couples, in fact, both get elected to council. We've certainly had couples who are quite open about being couples at councils, including last term. But of course, what it raises is this question of conflicts of interest, because the Local Government Act talks about the personal interests of my family member, my domestic partner, my spouse become my interests, and I need to declare them.
So let me put the question to you, Tony, and there is a twist in the tail here. Should a partner of another councillor who's being nominated for mayor declare a conflict of interest in that vote?
I would say yes, because the partner's being asked to vote on a matter where there's a clear personal interest. Indeed, there's, one could say, a financial interest.
Yes.
Higher salary, allowance. But generally, I think things like seconding a motion or just voting on a matter that a partner has raised at council wouldn't, for me, to create that conflict of interest. But the mayoral position, I think, would, if there was a need to have a vote.
And that's the twist in the tail here, as I understand it. Only the one nomination, Councillor Jolly nominated for mayor, no other nominations. So it didn't actually go to a vote.
Congratulations to Councillor Jolly. He's obviously got the support of his colleagues there, but it is an interesting conundrum, as you say, not unprecedented, but I'm glad to see all things have seem to have resolved themselves appropriately on,
So to be
score.
clear, we're saying one nomination, no vote required, no need to declare a conflict of interest.
Absolutely. I don't think anything's occurred wrong there because of that process you've outlined. Yeah.
Good to have that definitive call there from Tony Raunic. And very quickly before we go, an interesting ombudsman report this week. It's got some implications for local government in terms of planning schemes and flood risk information. Most of these recommendations were for the government and for Melbourne Water. Your thoughts? Have you had a chance to have a look?
Yeah, I have had a look at this Victorian Ombudsman report, which relates to some flooding in two estates adjacent the Maribyrnong River. The flooding occurred a couple of years ago, but reflects on the need for there to be, updated planning and building controls. And in at least one of these estates, which didn't flood, Kensington Banks, there is now a kind of subject to flooding understanding, and 850 homes there are, subject to potential flooding in future. And at the time the estate was developed, subdivided, that wasn't something that the council, Melbourne Water, local authorities were aware of. So one of the things that have come out of the Ombudsman's recommendation is that there ought to be this accessible portal place where data on likely flooding can be stored and can be accessible to members of the public who is like buying a house, thinking of moving into an area. And similarly, I think what it means for the sector is that not just like water authorities, we as councils should be constantly evolving our controls. So there will be enclaves, areas across Victoria where there are pockets of development, adjacent rivers, the beaches, seascapes, etc., that was seen appropriate 20 years ago based on the climate modelling we had then, the knowledge we have of climate behaviour. And yet here we are now in 2025, almost 2026, we have a much better understanding of the severity of these flood events.
All right, it's an interesting read, and we will be delving into that a little deeper with Karen Ellis from the Ombudsman's office in an upcoming edition of VLGA Connect, but the report is out. And there were some adverse comments in relation to the Moonee Valley City Council and the City of Melbourne as well, which are worth noting, and in terms of their responses. Tony, great to catch up. Lots there to digest, and we hope to see you again very soon here on VLGA Connect. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks, viewers.
It's time to catch up with another of our VLGA board members, a continuing series here at VLGA Connect, so you can get to know the people who are representing you around the board table just a little bit better. And today I've got the Vice President. It's Councillor Janet Pearce from Macedon Shire Council. Lovely to see you, Janet. Welcome to VLGA Connect.
Thank you, Chris. I'm really happy to be here.
You've been on the board since last year and now Vice President. How are you enjoying that role?
I'm loving it. It's a great role. VLGA is a great board, and very pleased to have been elected.
Tell me about your background. How long have you been on council there at Macedon Ranges?
So I was elected in 2016. We moved here in 2000, and my husband and I started, like many people, volunteering on committees, met a lot of people, and that I did a Loddon Murray Community Leadership Program in 2013 because I was volunteering on many boards. I was chair of the Neighbourhood House, was one of them. And that really, I think I saw the power of community. I thought we could, do some more connection with community, voice of community, how much the community were valuable in the Shire. And I was encouraged to run for council, and I did, and I'm really pleased I did.
So that community leadership program then was pretty significant in your community representative role. Can you tell us a bit more about how that formed the councillor you are now?
Yes, most definitely. If I hadn't done that leadership program, I don't think I would have had the confidence maybe to run for council. And also what I realised the value of the community and how powerful it is and what a fantastic resource it is. how we affect the lives of people, and the connection, if that's connected into council, what an asset that can be. So, of course, there was many, I'm lucky that I'm a nurse and midwife, I work locally, and so I had a lot of contact with people as well. And, I was so happy that we could raise our children here. So I think that all led to this drive, and there's more to it, that you look at planning for now, planning for the future. And I think that the leadership program, because you travel around the regions, you see many communities, what they're doing, what's possible. I think you see what's possible. So that was a great thing for me.
And were there any particular driving issues that led you to say, I now want to take that next step and run for council?
Yes, I think that I felt that I was hearing a lot of voices, and I had a lot of contact with groups, and there were some challenges. I always think for challenges, there's opportunities. So there were some challenges which I thought could be opportunities if they felt that they were more connected and valued and had a partnership with council. And because council, ultimately, all the decisions that are made affect people's lives, I think we should make sure we're including people in the consultations, in the information, in decision making. And so that was a big focus for me.
And how do you score yourself now in your third term, is it? You're in your third term.
Third term, yeah.
On being able to influence those sorts of issues that you were hoping to before you got on council. Do you think you've had an impact?
I would hope so.
Yeah.
I feel I have. I think there's always ways to improve. And if we never, because the environment's always changing, opportunities are there, how we can go out to community. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. A lot of councils are doing things in different ways. So I think that we have improved. I'd like to think we have, but I think we can still improve, always improve.
So logically now the next step is you've put your hand up for the VLGA board and you've been successful in getting elected last year. What was the motivation there?
So VLGA, I think, well, I can remember in 2016 when I was elected, the first networking event I went to, and I was speaking to CEOs, councillors, board members were even there. And what I felt in over that time, I've also gone to professional development opportunities through VLGA. The whole time over the years, I've always found the staff have been very knowledgeable and very practical. I really like that there's a focus. We know the focus and the vision is on councillors and people working in council on support, good governance, leadership, culture, improving professional development, etc. So I've always felt I like the strategic plan. I've had very positive experiences. I've known councillors on VLGA in the past as well. And I've always thought every year when the elections nominations have come up, I like the fact that it's, you nominate and you're elected by councillors. So I've seen them grow and develop, and I've always thought about it. And so last year I just thought, that's it. Put your nomination in, and I'm very pleased I was elected.
So if we were to crystal ball gaze for a moment and flash forward, a year, 2 years, 3 years, however long you plan to be on the board, what sort of an impact or influence are you hoping to have?
Well, I hope that we all have a voice. We've got I like the fact that there's elected councillors and independent representation, and we do look at the skills base on that. I like to think that we connect that we are using evidence-based. So if we look at the census that's going out, I think that's very important work, continually annual census, so we can gather some information and then use that to act on issues that we find. I hope that one of the big aspects is the partnerships I think we're developing. VLGA Connect is wonderful. I think the last few years, LGIU, looking at the broader, I think representing everybody. We've got 79 councils, 53 are members of VLGA. And I think while we all know that across the board of councils, there are generally some, issues and opportunities that are similar, We know that, of course, we've got rural and regional face specific issues as well, and Metro do as well. So I think having a broad representation, I hope being a rural representative, I can also bring that to the board, and the connections, because we're all out talking to councillors all around Victoria. You hear around Australia as well. So I think keeping yourself informed, knowing what's happening, being open to be contacted, giving feedback, listening. I hope I can bring all that to the board, and good governance.
Excellent. And I was going to ask you about that regional role and the importance of that, but you've covered that very nicely indeed. So Janet, congratulations and well done. Thank you for coming on VLGA Connect. It's good for people to get to know the board members a little bit better, and it's just been a few minutes to introduce you to the wider audience, and I thank you for your time. Well,
thank you, Chris, and thanks for all VLGA Connect does. It's such an important, I get a lot of positive feedback about it as well.
Thank you. Nice of you to say. Good to have you on.
Okay.
All the best.
Bye-bye.
That's Councillor Janet Pearce, Vice President of the VLGA. Well, thanks to our guests today, Janet Pearce there, Tony Raunic and Alison Byrne from IBAC, a bumper edition of VLGA Connect. Now, just before we go, early bird registrations are open for Fast Track 2026, the VLGA's national one-day annual conference focused on incivility and its threat to local democracy. The event will bring together stakeholders from across the local government sector to address the rise of incivility in public discourse and its impact on democratic processes. And if you book before the 31st of December, you can secure early bird prices. Head to the VLGA website to find out more, vlga.org.au. The details are there on the events page. That's our show for this week. Thanks for being with us on YouTube, where you should hit that subscribe button, or if you're listening on podcast, we'll be back with more for you next week. Bye for now.